Snacks. What it do, snackers, snackettes, and snack X's? It's your boy Gage. I'm here with Sin, and we are here to give our reactions to the Xbox business update that happened earlier today. For those of you who might be unaware, Microsoft has had I'm gonna say a rough week in social media. You know what I mean? Like the last week or two, really. Yeah. I said the last, a rough week, but like the last week or two have probably been pretty rough, to say the least. So a lot of rumors, specifically about Microsoft's future with exclusivity, Microsoft's AAA game titles going to other platforms, a la PlayStation and Nintendo. Concerns about the platform itself going away, Microsoft not making consoles anymore for Xbox, like all of that kind of stuff has been, the rumor mill has been full.
Yes.
It has been full. Overflowing, as a matter of fact. If you're tuned into the folks who are like Xbox enthusiast streamers, a lot of them have been posting shows like talking about like, what am I gonna do now? I guess we'll make a different kind of podcast or something like that, as if you can't just talk about video games or whatever because they've been Xbox centric. There's been a lot that has happened, an implosion of things, if you will.
Yes.
And so last week, Phil Spencer, who is the head of gaming for Microsoft, and has been at the head of what's going on with Xbox gaming for about the last 10 years or so now, put out a statement saying, we were planning a business update, but we'll let you know more. And, we're going to tell you more next week. So that was last week. So then this week, a couple days ago, they put a proposal on Monday saying they would have a conversation today. And that conversation would be on the official Xbox podcast, which I think also threw a lot of people for a loop. And we discussed that a little bit on Tuesday when we did Loading Snacks Weekly. As a matter of fact, we discussed it a lot of it. But I mean, in terms of the fact that it was going to be a podcast, we discussed a little bit and how we thought about that. So, Sen and I have both had a chance to watch the podcast. It's not super long.
No, that shocked me about it. I thought it was gonna be longer than what it was.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that. It's not super long. It is Tina Amini, who heads like video and so forth and kind of helms the podcast stuff on the Xbox and she used to be at IGN. Her basically in an interview format with Phil Spencer, Sarah Bond, and Matt Booty, who are the other two people who are helming Xbox gaming. Sin.
Yeah.
Before you give me your overall thoughts on the podcast, what was said, and we're going to get into some specifics, but I want to start by asking you whether or not you feel like the questions that people seem to be, the things that people seem to be concerned about, did they respond to the concerns of, I'm going to air quote, the people? You're dedicated to yourself.
Yeah, so not anymore. Thank you for that. I think they did. The things I was looking for answers about, they answered for me personally, and I think a lot of people had the same, questions and concerns, especially with verbiage they've used, with uh, exclusivity and all that type of stuff. So those questions got addressed. They got answered. Overall, I feel like they answered what they needed to help quell the masses that were upset about things that heard as rumors or have been hearing about.
Yeah, look, it's interesting to me, again, the landscape that we're in, where the internet goes into an actual full-on panic mode, as if the information that they have heard from the rumor mill is in fact the fact.
Right.
Now, that's not to say some of the things that we have heard are coming from what most people would consider, within the rumor mill, very reliable sources. So I can understand some of the concern that comes from that, because there are people, and I will name a name or two, but like a Jeff Grubb, who tends to have a really, really good insight, has really, really good connections, and many times, not all the time, but many times, is right about the things that he says on his podcast and to other people on other podcasts. So when he says something, people go, ah. I think people went from going, that's probably true, to going, Jeff Grubb said it, so.
So it's definitely true.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
So, and it does not mean in some manner that some of the things that he said were not happening, because he seems to have been right about some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
For the important questions that you had, Sin, what were they? Just line them up for me.
The exclusivity thing, because yes, it doesn't.
Meaning what specifically though? Exclusivity
That
as it
exclusivity was
as
quote unquote looking to be going away. Like when they're talking about, yeah, we're putting all these games on other platforms and all that kind of stuff. That's the thing I wanted to hear them talk about and address. Uh, I was in the mode of like, if it is, like, cool. If it's not, it's whatever. I get it. People can't afford every console. So if you make a decision, you want to know that you're getting, what you were looking forward to, those exclusive titles and all that kind of stuff, whatever platform. Because everybody, yes, can't afford every single console. Fortunately, I can, so it doesn't bother me in the same way, because 9 times out of 10 I'll get to play it regardless, because I have all three of the consoles. So I'm glad that they addressed that, and I'm also glad they addressed kind of like Ubisoft's stance on like, just get over it. Games aren't going to be like here, like you're not going to own your games type of thing. And I feel like they kind of addressed that with the backwards compatibility part of it. Like, we get you pay your hard money, you have your saves and all that kind of stuff, and
well, they did specifically talk about like game preservation and what
yes,
Xbox's stance is on game preservation and digital libraries and so forth.
yes, yeah. So and using, I thought using the PC was kind of like a smart way just to kind of put, like, PCs are made to be able to play these older games, and they build the software builds on top of them, and you can play the new games and the older games, and it works. And that's kind of how they're looking at Xbox now and going forward as far as that type of stuff is concerned. So those are the two biggest things I want them to address
Okay.
for me, and I'm glad they did, so that way the masses can relax, calm down, and enjoy the ride that Xbox is attempting to take us on.
Would you have? Cuddy said there's 3 consoles. I mean, 2.5 consoles. Maybe you don't
I
consider
really
the
want to
Switch a
call it,
console.
but yeah, like Switch, PlayStation, and Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox. Yeah.
So I many times I feel like when Phil Spencer, part of the reason why I like Phil Spencer is because I think that Phil Spencer breaks the rules in terms of simply speaking about what the honest to goodness business of video games really is like, in a way that nobody at Microsoft / Xbox has ever done in the past, and that for the most part nobody at any other console manufacturer has done either.
Mm-hmm.
And the concerns that people have had, again, I talked about this a little bit on Weekly, but the idea of exclusivity is, it's not strange. It is part of being a console gamer. It just is. It's just part of it. It is something that has always been a part of that. Atari games were Atari games. Nintendo games were Nintendo games.
Mm-hmm.
Look, back in the day, 8-bit consoles, like the version of a game, even if it was the same title, the version of a game that was on the NES and the version of that game that were on the Master System were two different games. They weren't the same game. Double Dragon on the NES and Double Dragon on the Master System, two different games. The Master System version had co-op. Like you would get that. So when you had teams that were taking quote unquote the same title and putting it on Nintendo, Sega, and then also on their handhelds, you weren't getting the same version of that game, right? It was a different SKU for more reasons than just it's on a different console, right? And that idea of a console having something exclusive is so deeply embedded, I think, into the console player for the people who game really hard.
Mm-hmm.
For the general public, they don't really care so much. It's probably more confusing than anything else. To show up somewhere to get a game you saw a commercial for, or pick up a game for your kid or whatever, and say, yeah, I want to get such and such game, and they get it for you, and they hand it to you, you buy it, you take it home, and have the kid go, I don't have an Xbox, I can't play this game. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, don't they all work on any?
Exactly. I was about to say that. Yeah, yeah.
Because you also can walk into the store and find Madden for everything, and you can walk in the store and find Just Dance for everything, and you can't. So like, for those of us who, I'm gonna say, pick a side, right? For some of us, picking a side is exactly that. For others of us, picking a side is more like choosing a preference. In that I prefer the Xbox ecosystem. I prefer the PlayStation controller. I prefer to play my games on the go, so I go with the Switch. You know what I mean? Like whatever, but I have all three, or I play all three, or I have two of the three, or whatever it is, right? Cuddy says, shout out to Ali for having a Neo Geo in our group. You right. Mr. Infinity had the he did not have a Neo Geo. What he had was a TurboGrafx 16. I just want you to know that.
I'm about to say Neo Geo. Woo.
Yeah. I think that the business insight that comes when Phil speaks and says something like, if you look at the general landscape, right, the biggest games on the planet, forget our platform, forget the Sony whatever, like the biggest games on the planet are multi-platform. They're like, if you look at the Call of Duty, there's Call of Duty's on everything, and it's on mobile, right? It's on PC, it's on mobile, it's on PlayStation, right? Everything but Nintendo right? Which they intend to change. If you look at Fortnite's on everything. It's on your tablet, it's on your TV, it's on your, you know what I mean? It's on everything, right? That's PUBG, right? Biggest games in the world. Like, if you look at the games that are the biggest games in the world, they are on multiple platforms, including PC and or mobile. So when you are not just in charge of a platform, which they are, but you also now especially have more publishers and game developers under your belt than basically anybody else has. There is a possibility of saying, well, we just lock all that down to our platform. None of these people get them. And then, but that just because you had $70 billion to spend to buy that doesn't mean that the person who didn't have enough money for a PlayStation and an Xbox all of a sudden has a new $500 to spend on an Xbox so they can play all those games that you decided you're now going to lock behind a window, which, you know, in some cases is still what's happening. So, like, looking at that landscape, I just think in a lot of ways is eye-opening for a lot of people, because they talk about the business and they act like they know the business. And even though it seems like it makes business sense, until you have a person who lives and breathes the business and sees it all the way down from the top to the bottom, actually say it out loud, right? In the same way when Phil said, look, we lost the last console generation. We're in third, and we lost because we lost the most important generation, which is when people started building their libraries digitally. And now they want to take that ecosystem with them. How do you win that back? If you started playing PlayStation games on a PS3 and you have those games locked with you, why would you leave? I think the difference is, and they kind of spoke to this like you said, Sin, it is having something like backwards compatibility built in and going to what they've been saying, but this idea of really not believing in generations in terms of your games. Believing in generations in terms of your hardware should not be the same thing as determining how you feel about generations necessarily in games, and whether or not those can come along with you because you have an ownership, digital or otherwise. So I'm kind of glad you brought that up.
I was going to say, one of the things to the business thing you're talking about with Phil Spencer, as far as just being up front and talking about that kind of stuff, I did like when he was explaining, just, you know, Microsoft is in the business to make money, you know what I mean, at the end of the day. Sure. And he was explaining how when it comes to these games and looking at putting on other platforms or whatever, I know he mentioned 4 of them. I know we'll get to that. He didn't say what they were, but we can speculate that as to what they are. But those games going to other places, like, okay, we can figure out ways to up prices and stuff that make money from the people we already have in our ecosystem, or figure out ways to expand it and grow the ecosystem. So
correct.
The people already in it are taking that hit. We're just looking to grow and just building more income like that way. So
correct.
Yeah.
100%. Like what he's talking about in terms of business is a term. It's called organic growth. It is the idea of it's not just a brick and mortar position, but it is the idea that, all right, we have 2 million customers and we're not growing anymore beyond that 2 million customers. So in order for the business to grow, that means we have to find ways to make more money from the 2 million people we already have. Right? So how do we nickel and dime them and pull money out of them or whatever? Or you can expand the business and expand the growth by going and getting more people in, which in a business like gaming makes more sense when you have live service games that only benefit from having more people to play with. Okay. Which is a lesson that I personally believe Sony is learning currently because of not just because of what they've seen with Xbox, but because of what's happening with Helldivers.
Agreed.
Right. You have somebody new at the
helm right now. Yeah.
Right. It's on Steam and PlayStation for the first time ever at the same time. And they are seeing incredible numbers they just would not see any other way. Now, does that mean they would experience that same kind of success if it was a single player game? Maybe not. Right.
Yeah. That player count would drop off after a while. Once people beat it, like it would just go down and go away.
Yeah. But here's the other thing you have to consider. Again, we're talking about the business of doing this, right? Part of what you consider when you decide I'm putting out a new video game or anything new that you're putting out, right, is what your marketing budget is, right? So if you're building a game and that game costs, let's say, $150 million to make that game, right? And then you have a $50 million marketing budget. So you can get commercials. You're doing stuff with streamers. You're getting commercials on ESPN. You're going to do a Super Bowl ad because of the timing of the game. You know what I mean? Like all that kind of stuff, right? We're putting up billboards or doing stuff in train stations, all of the kind of stuff that it costs money to market that game. If that game is coming out now and that game is only on PlayStation or only on Xbox, and then you're going to release it again in a year, but only for PC, what's that marketing campaign look like? What are those marketing dollars like when you go to do that again, technically as another release? It's nowhere near the same as that first push. So if you do it all at once, let's take the same marketing budget, and all we're really doing with that with those same assets is saying PlayStation and PC.
And PC, yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. You're adding 3 letters. You know, like
that's it.
It's 5.
And you're just pushing the button to upload the PC. Like that's it at the end of the day.
I mean, I'm sure it's not quite that simple.
But you get what I'm saying. Yeah.
Right. At the end of the day, what are you saving marketing capital? And I think more importantly, in what you touched on when Phil was speaking about that, you know, in the interview, Tina Amini brings up the fact that, you know, last year for a lot of people, if you were a gamer, a consumer, a player, people are like 2023 might be the greatest year in gaming ever when you look at all the releases and so forth. However, we saw so many mass layoffs right throughout that literally what he's saying is, yeah, the way that happened, there were a lot of great games, but it's not sustainable, right? And there's no growth. And when the business isn't growing, you unfortunately, and he had to take it on the chin like us, you have to make decisions that affect people's lives. And now we had to like lay people off, right? But we certainly weren't the only ones who had to do that. It is happening throughout the entire industry over and over again. And we need to make decisions that are going to make sure that it's sustainable. To me, what that says, Sin, is, and we can use this to get into some of the speculation of what these games are going to be, right, that are coming over, right? Mm-hmm. We've heard, what, Hi-Fi Rush?
Yes. We've heard the pirate joint, Sea of Thieves.
Sea of Thieves. Pentiment.
I've heard that. I'm not sure what Pentiment is, but I've heard that.
It was a small game that came out, RPG, that was like, for a lot of people, it was their game of the year. Came from one of Microsoft Studios, and I have heard possibly Grounded.
I've heard as that the fourth
title, right? So, and he said 2 live service games and 2 games that are smaller games. So to me, that's Grounded and 2 live service games, Grounded and Sea of Thieves, and then Hi-Fi Rush and Pentiment.
Yep,
right.
Those are my picks. Even though, well, the other 3, because I don't know about Pentiment, but yes, so those are my picks. Yeah.
So
easy picks.
Let's take a Hi-Fi Rush, because that's one that you're familiar with. You're not familiar with Pentiment. Let's take Hi-Fi Rush. Smaller game, created at a studio that is known for bigger games. They had Ghostwire Tokyo, right? Same developer. We've known them for doing larger scale, kind of scary games, whatever. So Hi-Fi Rush was not only a surprise because they surprise dropped it, but it also was a game that was very different from anything we've ever gotten from this studio. That studio has always made thrillers and more scary games and stuff like that, right? But they had this small team within them that had this idea that was gestating, and they wanted to do it. And with Microsoft, they had the money / ability to go and make that game, right? But what does that cost? To pull people off of a larger scale game, to do something smaller, to maintain that game, to upkeep servers, to do updates for that game, and so forth. When that company, again, is normally known for larger things, and how do they go and pay for the bigger project if they don't take a smaller game like that when they put it out and it sees success, or they don't make crazy money on it, because most people played it on Game Pass, though it did see some great sales.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make that game's success as a critical darling turn into a business success that allows you to turn around and put money into the next Evil Within game, which is what people expect from that you know what I mean?
Right.
From that company, right? If Ghostwire Tokyo didn't do great numbers, and I don't think it did, right? How do you keep from having to lay people off at you know what I mean, at that developer when they've had not great success with the last game, but then they had this enormously successful and popular game that they did
With the
put out,
smaller game, yeah.
but it's smaller and it's not bringing in as much money because it is Game Pass, because you know what I mean? How do you make that sustainable so you don't have to lay people off from that team? Right?
Open the forbidden doors, if you will. You know what I mean? Put it on other platforms. Throw it on the Switch. Perfect for the
You
Switch.
treat it like a fire and you put that thing out. You put it out. You
yeah,
put it out.
basically, yeah. Especially when it's getting critically acclaimed, like it's winning awards and stuff like that. Yeah, let other people get their hands on this and see it. You know what I mean? Let's get that revenue back in here. Yeah.
100%. 100%. So I think, again, kind of that very open and honest discussion of not just Xbox's business in gaming, but in the business of video games as a whole. Because you're not just speaking to the Xbox gamers, you're speaking to everyone. You're speaking to the Nintendo people who love Nintendo. You're speaking to the people who love PlayStation. Because if you want to keep playing games, you don't want these people to keep getting laid off, keep getting fired, and go find jobs elsewhere else, because video games is not sustainable. What it costs to make a AAA game versus what they charge for a AAA game certainly does not equate.
No, I'm about to say, keep it a buck. They should be charging us a lot more for video games with the time and the effort and the hours and all that stuff they slave into these AAA games nowadays. Facts, they should be charging us a lot more than what they are charging us.
And they try, and people are angry about it, right? Oh, this game has microtransactions. I can't stand it. Get them out of here. Yeah, but bro,
how are they supposed to make?
We gotta eat,
so we don't get laid off.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
right.
Right. And they're just microtransactions. As long as it's not paid to win, it's not hurting anybody. You know what I mean? It doesn't hurt anybody.
Right. I will also say this. Matt Booty talked about the inversion of the business, right? He specifically said the business used to be that you would build the platform, right? And then have the games come out to build the platform and make the platform bigger. And now it's the other way around, because these games are bigger than the platform. Again, your Fortnites and so forth. And so the business has changed, where now you want your platform to be able to support how big these games are getting, how fast they are, how many people need to be in them, how often people are playing. Servers are constantly
gigs, like with all the updates, how many gigs is how much space is taking up on people's hard drives.
Right. How quickly your hard drive can be accessed. Like, you're building around the size of the games, and those games continuing to grow. If you look at a Grand Theft and what it was 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago, when it came out on the 360 and the PS3, and you take the online version of that game and just look at how it is expanded and how much space it takes up on your hard drive and what has to happen.
You started Grand Theft looking for stuff to do online. Now you look into the map, you're like, where do I even start? It's so much to do in this game now.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Cuddy says, speaking of layoffs, Nintendo CEO power move, cutting his salary in half. Yeah, I mean, look, that was done years ago. Satoru Iwata did that years ago to make sure that he could keep. That was a thing that happened when the Wii U was not successful. All right, well, I'm going to take a pay cut so we can keep these people, because now we need to build the next thing so we can move on, which is, you know, where your Switch comes from. What do you think, Sin? I mean, at the end of the day, is the conversation that they had today satisfactory for, let's just say, the majority of the people who it would matter to?
I think it is. I think last time when they had like conversations like this, it's all going to come down to do it, execute on it. You know what I mean? If you're going to do it and you're telling us all these things, you have to execute on the plan that you're telling us in public that this is what you're looking at. These are the type of games we're looking at doing as a putting on other consoles, live service with huge communities and stuff like that. The backwards compatibility thing, this, like we're looking at building this hardware like this, so you can keep all that kind of stuff. You still have it's all about the execution and fulfilling what you said going forward. Right now, everything sounds good just listening to it, but you just got to prove it going forward.
I mean, look, I think it would quell the people who may have been in the camp of I'm getting rid of Xbox and I'm moving over to somewhere else because there's no reason for me to keep playing here if they're going to put their games
Other platforms
elsewhere. Yes. So let's talk about some bullet points. Exclusivity. How comfortable are we with Xbox and exclusivity and what that means?
I'm fine. They got me with that, saying they're just looking at like the smaller big titles and just the ones that are community driven, like Sea of Thieves and Grounded. I'm perfectly fine with that. For business model, everything that makes sense to me, I have no problem. That reassures me that these exclusives are still coming to the console, that we have these big AAA exclusives and stuff like that. I don't have a problem with, and it's at older games too. So they're not looking at nothing recent now, but of course that can change. So
the coming out in definitive, like even though Phil was like, I'm not going to tell you what games it is because those teams are working really hard to set that up and get the announcements ready, and we don't want to take that steam from them, and I respect that, right? But specifically answering the question and saying, are those two of those games Indiana Jones and or Starfield? No.
Straight up.
Right? I think that's a big deal. K Dizzle says they still have the best online community platform, chat, etc. I'm good too. Look, I'm happy to hear that. I'll be honest with you. I don't even use Xbox chat anymore. We use Discord.
More. Yeah, once we
and the fact that Discord is available directly in Xbox, like I don't even.
Yeah.
You know, but
like now when we get together, people be like on Xbox chat, like, nah, bro, you have to get in Discord. Like we just
yeah. We moved over.
Yeah. Evolved.
You know, as far as the exclusivity goes, right? And again, we have a couple of bullet points to hit, but as far as the exclusivity goes, I mean, look, I think they landed very clearly, and it's not different from what you heard other people say kind of in reactions to what some of the rumors are, but Game Pass is kind of where that exclusivity really lives, right? So saying, look, all first party is still coming to Game Pass day one. Okay. New games and older. Still coming to Game Pass day one. You're going to have access to those games. That, you know what I mean? It is what it is. I think is, having said it, it is not as poignant as if they had shown it by being like, here's all these Activision Blizzard games now available in, you know what I mean, in Game Pass, you know, whatever, right? But just saying, look, starting with Diablo 4, which, I mean, look, it'll roll off my back. I paid for it already. You know what I mean? It is what it is. But having Diablo 4 hit Game Pass is going to reinvigorate that title. They're just...
Absolutely.
I mean, we also, for the first time, got them to actually say how many Game Pass subscribers they have at 34 million. I don't think we had ever actually... We had heard it, but only early, in like the early days. It's been a long time, right? So I also think there's something to be considered about feeding, quote unquote, for free, all of these game titles to 34 million people, right? When you look at it and you see how much money there is to be made. But you know, in a lot of cases, these are probably going to be titles that are already available on other platforms, right? Or they might be titles that you've already paid for because they're Activision Blizzard King. To also hear them say, you know, we basically have the biggest hand in mobile now too, right? Again, a thing that a lot of people just aren't really thinking about. But them wanting to be able... Look, do I think a Hi-Fi Rush could work? On mobile, I don't know that it could work as it currently exists, but could they have a team build a version of Hi-Fi Rush in terms of making that a franchise that matters and putting that on other platforms? Absolutely. So that is a thing that to me makes a ridiculous amount of sense. I got food coming in.
It's okay. I figured when you look at it, I was like, somebody's interrupting him right now.
Yeah. So to me, that makes a good amount of sense, right? Like, what do we do with this mobile platform, and how can we introduce these other games that we now have access to a place where we didn't really have that kind of access, and success before? Let's talk about generations and hardware, because a lot of the rumors were, when Xbox getting out of the hardware, they're not making consoles no more.
Nope, but they addressed that too. Yep.
How do you feel about the way it was addressed and what was said?
I mean, they said we have new hardware coming this holiday. They didn't say what it was specifically.
They didn't say that. They said we have an announcement about hardware coming this holiday.
Okay. Corrected, but still hearing that, like, okay, they have something on the horizon. More than likely, I'm thinking it's that midway kind of point upgrade of the Elite. You know what I mean? I think it's probably that. Maybe even a new updated what's the controller they use for like the
Elite controller?
No, not the Elite. The one.
The accessibility controller.
Yes. Maybe an update to that one, like a version 2 of it or something like that, where they improved on things that people might have problems with the last time around. Maybe something like that. Those are the first two things that popped in my mind when they said, new hardware. So that's kind of where I'm at with that right now. I think it's one of those probably.
I mean, they specifically called out generations. They did specifically say that we're already in the roadmap for the next generation of hardware. But then along with that, they said that they would have an announcement coming in holiday. Now, the other thing they said about that, and I want to read this because the specific quote I think is important. Sarabon specifically said that they're aiming for this to be the largest technical leap you will have ever seen in a generation.
Okay.
So there's a couple of things there that I think matter. But one, we're in the roadmap for next generation. To me means, okay, yes, we're getting a new Xbox that maybe is beyond what this current generation is. In terms of the technical leap, to me, it means there is a very expensive Xbox coming that is probably a mid-generation refresh. But when you're talking about a giant technical leap, to me, that spells dollars. And if you recall when they announced the Xbox One X, and they priced it out, and people were like, yo, $500, that's a lot. People already paid people paid $400 for the original one with the Kinect. $500 for this. To me, that says because the prices of consoles are not and have not come down. As a matter of fact, in most cases, the cost of consoles have gone up for both Microsoft and for Sony, not for Nintendo, but it's gone up. They have raised prices on consoles in most countries, not necessarily here, but in most countries, right? That says to me, either there's a price dropper coming this holiday, or whatever this is going to be $600 plus. And it will be set up the same way they did when they said, look, we know the One X is not for everybody.
Right.
Not everybody's ready to go into 4K gaming. Not everybody, those people, and generally pointing at the people who bought an Elite controller, we know that there are people out there who are going to want this thing.
Yep.
I think is where they're probably trying to go in terms of what this is. They are really looking to put out hardware that can do a better job of matching how, like, every time a new game comes out that runs across all platforms and PC, you get like a Digital Foundry where they do the test and it's like PC just they crush it. And I just think, Microsoft, as a company that has spent so much time in that space,
they're trying to close that gap as close as possible.
We need to partner with some people to do that. There's a part of me that feels like what's probably going to happen with consoles is a lot more likely to be similar to what happens with laptops and PCs, and maybe less likely to be what happens with phones. I keep hearing consoles get compared to like phones, right? When a new iPhone comes out, the next generation of iPhone, you might not upgrade for 2 years, right? Okay. But the new one is out, right? So if you have a 14 or 13 Pro, you might not upgrade until the 16 comes out, but the 15 is out. You know what I mean? And they do a new one every year. And that's just because they have so many people that are ready to refresh. And there are people who do it every year. But there are a lot of people who are just like, I've had my phone for 3 years, and there's so many of them, I'm going to get a new one now. In the meantime, they are making money off of you being in that ecosystem and being on that platform. I think that's a lot more of what we're looking at. I do think that the lines between what is one generation and what is the next generation is going to start going away the same way it basically doesn't exist with computers. When a person buys a PC or they buy a laptop, they know they're going to likely have that for 2, 3, 4 years. And then they're going to get a new one, right? Because it's going to start to get slow. It's going to start to get outdated. It can't do everything they wanted to do. It, just all that kind of stuff. That, like, when you think about what the cost of a laptop is or the cost of a new PC is, it is way more expensive than a console. However, you can do a lot more with it than you can with a console, right? And so it's not exactly the same, but it kind of sits in between those two lines of what it means to go from a generation to a generation. And I think that what Microsoft / Xbox is attempting to do is get to a place where, again, with backwards compatibility and cloud gaming, they made it so that if you still have an Xbox One, but you're on Game Pass, technically you can play, and you have a strong enough internet connection, you can stream games that were made for the series consoles, and they will run better on your Xbox One than they would run off of a disc because they're coming out of the cloud, and the cloud is all based on that newer architecture, right? So you might have an Xbox One and you weren't ready to upgrade to a Series S or X, but you might be ready to go to the next one and all your stuff will still be there. Just like if you have an iPhone 14 and you're not ready to go to the 15, but you are going to go to the 16, right? And that line between what works on what generation is blurred by the software, less by the hardware, right? That to me makes more sense. And I think it's a thing that Sony's probably going to have to do too, because what they have tried to do in this generation by coming into it saying, we believe in generations, and saying, if you want any of these games, you have to get a PlayStation 5. Even if the pandemic hadn't been a thing that kept PlayStation 5s from being as readily available as they wanted them to be, now they've been caught with their pants down lying because these games did work on the PlayStation 4. And you did put most of it on the PlayStation 4. And we're only just now, 3.5, 4 years in, getting games that are only on the newer platform and can maybe really only run on the newer platform. Meaning that there's a crossover period where the PlayStation 6 could come out, and that means they could continue to support the PlayStation 5 for another 3 to 4 years with stuff that works on both platforms, not having developers be stuck having to only develop for a PlayStation 2 or do a different game, right? And I think that's more of where we're heading. And I think that this technological leap that she's talking about is going to be the beginning of that, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Because if it's a mid-generation thing, the way she said it, I think a lot of people immediately were like, oh, new generation is coming. Even if they announce this is going to be, she said in a generation, not going to a next generation or whatever. She said the biggest technical leap you've ever seen in a generation.
Right.
To me, that signals that whatever they're talking about doing is still within this current generation of the Series SX and whatever the next thing is, if it's a Series Z,
Mhm.
you know what I mean, or whatever, right? But that it's going to be a lot more powerful, right? And if that's the case, then the people who are ready to jump will jump. But I also think that whatever the quote unquote next generation will be isn't going to leave that thing behind. You'll still be able to play on it. You're still going to have the
They'll just
same
keep
games.
adding on top of it.
You're
Yeah.
still going to have your right. I mean, Game Pass, when it came out like 5 years ago, was 100 games and that was it. And now, I don't even know.
Right.
But once they start dropping these Activision joints,
I'm seeing something new in there. It seems like almost every other day in Game Pass now. Sometimes it'll be one
it's
drop.
kinda
Sometimes it'll be 2, 3. Like, okay, y'all just giving us stuff to play now. Okay, love it.
it's kind of sickening. Having Diablo 4 start off the Activision Blizzard thing coming March 28th, so end of March.
Okay.
Do you think we get more Activision Blizzard games coming to Game Pass announced prior to the release of Diablo 4 coming to Game Pass?
Maybe a slate, like they'll roll them out in waves. Like we're putting out these titles April 15th or something like that. These all hit Game Pass that day, and June 1st or whatever, we'll put like another bunch of games on. I think they'll move them out in waves. They're not going to flood us all with everything straight off the bat. They'll roll them out, and we might get previous to Diablo. We may get information on whatever the first wave looks like. I think.
I certainly think you're right. They're gonna probably do it in waves. They're definitely gonna do it in waves.
Yeah.
I think they have to consider how they take the slate of games they already had that were supposed to be coming to Game Pass, right? So new games, third-party games that signed up for it, right? Like you can't necessarily drop a bunch of joints that overshadow the fact
you don't want to step on what you got coming.
Correct, right?
Yeah.
So you got to be very careful about how you do it and what games you put in. Somebody has to take the time to strategically place those games, as they come throughout the holiday and so forth, going in towards the end of the year. So I think that makes a big difference. I also think that there is still, there's still some, if you remember, we haven't talked about this in a while, but there was that weird thing with like certain games that are Activision Blizzard games having to be like cloud or streaming only through like Ubisoft or whatever, because they had to give those rights to Ubisoft like in the UK in order to make that a thing or whatever. There was that whole like, I don't know how that affects Game Pass here in the US, but it certainly could affect the way they roll out those games and so forth to Game Pass going to other countries, which means they have to be very careful about that messaging and how they do that going forward, because they can't just put a blanket statement out going, all these games are coming to Game Pass, right? They have to say, these games are coming to Game Pass /PC in the US. These games are coming, you know what I mean?
These other regions.
Or what, like
at a later date, something like that.
Whatever that's going to mean. So they have to be very careful about it. So we answered the question about hardware. We answered the question about generations. We answered the questions about exclusivity. How satisfied are you with the idea that the exclusivity, do you feel like the exclusivity ends at these 4 titles?
Honestly, no.
Me neither. No. He specifically said, we're going to put these 4 out and we're going to learn.
Exactly. I think that's exactly what it is. They'll use these 4 to really go in and test these waters for the future to see how they want to approach everything going forward. It's not the end of it by any way, shape, or form, because we agree these are some great titles to try this out with. And when they see these numbers come back, they're going to start looking at, all right, what are the next what are the next ones we want to take this approach with? And they'll start looking to, or they probably have already started looking. I'm pretty sure they have. What's in development coming down the pipeline of
Exactly.
what? Okay, this can get that treatment. We're gonna take that approach with these and push these in that direction. Whether they start on Xbox first and move over, or come out the gate just being everywhere. So no, this is just the start of what's coming in the future. That's all. And they'll assess it, see how it goes, and just move accordingly from there.
So a couple things. One, I think you're right. I think the fact that they reiterated multiple times, right, that like your first party games are coming to Game Pass day one. Mm-hmm. They didn't necessarily say first. They said your first party games are coming to Game Pass day one, right? And Game Pass will only ever be on Xbox.
Yep.
Maybe at some point, PlayStation's like, you know what? But I doubt it. Maybe at some point, Nintendo's like, you know what? But I doubt it. But we already know that Game Pass exists in other places because it's on like the Rogue Ally. You can technically do it from a Steam Deck, right? It's clearly on PC. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the console space,
right, it's
only on Xbox, right? Okay, so reiterating that as a fact and saying you're going to get those games day one on Game Pass is to me the advertisement for, yes, there might be games that are going to come out that day one, they are also available on other platforms, but you don't have to pay for them if you're in Game Pass. You know what I mean? Like you just have them. That's what that says to me. It also says to me they probably do still have other games that are smaller or maybe are even from a smaller developer like a Double Fine. I think that making an acquisition like Double Fine with the kinds of games that they generally do, right? What's that Halloween game they did? They did two.
Costume
Quest, games like Stacking that were like Xbox Live Arcade, even something like Psychonauts. Psychonauts 2 did release everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. But I think they look at that success and they look at the kind of game it is and they go, this is not necessarily a AAA giant budget game or whatever, but certainly it benefits from being available everywhere. Yes. If you're on Game Pass, you're going to have it. You don't have to worry about it. But it doesn't hurt you in the same way Psychonauts 2 didn't hurt you, that it was everywhere else, right? That it was on these other platforms. I think there's definitely more stuff coming down the line. The other thing I think they did a good job of reiterating and that I feel like they need to put some more oomph back into, again, when it comes to having a streaming library, what digital ownership looks like, is the Xbox Play Anywhere. I mean, they talked a lot about cross-play, cross-platform, and cross-save. How important that is to the ecosystem, how important that is to know that you can just pick up your game from one place and play it somewhere else, right? So I actually have a couple of questions about it, but like, I don't ever really think about the fact that like, when I buy a game on Xbox or I have the game through Game Pass, I also can just download and play that game on my laptop because you get dual licenses, right? So when you pay for it, you're not just paying for it once and that's the only place you get to play and that's all there is to it, like you do on a Nintendo console or like you do on a PlayStation console, right? If you buy Forza Motorsport 7, if you buy the new Forza Motorsport, you actually have it in both places. It's tied to your Microsoft account.
Yeah, to be honest, I never think about that either. I just think Xbox. Here it is, download, play. I never think about the PC. I separate the PC side because they have their own games that you can download there.
And they do. That's there are some things that only come to console. There are some things in Game Pass that only come to PC. But in terms of like, even if you just buy a game, you get that dual license, right? And that made me wonder.
So they're bringing up mine now on PC.
See what I'm saying? If you buy a Xbox game on PlayStation, will you still get that dual license? Do you still get the Xbox Play Anywhere? If you buy it on PlayStation, can you play it on your PC? Do you get it in your Windows PC or no?
That's a good question. And I think that's something they'll answer when they're closer to releasing what these 4 titles are.
And I'm going to tell you what I think. Remember we talked about how like now you basically can't play any game without having to sign up for something, right?
Yes.
You play a Blizzard game, you got to sign up for a Blizzard account. You playing a Square Enix game, you got to have a Square Enix account or whatever. And that's the thing that allows your saves to move back and forth. Same thing with like all the Ubisoft stuff with like the new Assassin's Creed and stuff like that. Like you can, especially if you have Ubisoft Plus, like you can play those anywhere. And your saves just kind of carry over.
Mm-hmm.
I think those games will show up on PlayStation. They'll show up on Nintendo's console, and you'll need to sign into an Xbox account.
Yep.
You need to create that Xbox account. And if they do allow you to do play anywhere, yes, but you'll sign into your Xbox account on your Windows and you'll have access to your games and your save. And they talked about the money they invested in cloud saves, the money they invested in the play anywhere, the money that they've invested in, again, backwards compatibility, the money that they've invested in those kinds of things. And like, it's still a thing that's happening that's crazy to me, that automatic, like you get the best version of the game for the console you're playing on thing is still a thing for Xbox, where like, man, on PlayStation 5, bro, it is still like you got to jump through hoops. You could accidentally download the wrong version of your joint and don't run as well, and you're not getting the best, you know what I mean? Whatever. And that's kind of crazy.
Yep.
I think they got to lean into that a little bit more. Is there a chance that that's what it's going to be? Like if you buy Hi-Fi Rush for your Switch, will that give you access to Hi-Fi Rush on your PC? You think that's happening?
I hope so.
Why? Why do you hope so?
Just I think it'll be cool. Like if the whole play anywhere type of thing, like, all right, you have it, you can download your Game Pass PC and stuff like that. Like I think it would just be a cool option to have. That's all.
Okay.
I'm saying, look at this now. I didn't realize all this stuff was in Game Pass on PC. Like it is. It's pretty much.
Yeah. Well, again, but we're not even just talking about Game Pass PC. I'm just talking about the fact that, like, again, you have. If you buy a game, you don't have to have Game Pass to access those games. Like if you buy a game on Xbox, the Play Anywhere allows you to play it on your PC without having to have Game Pass. You get it. They give you the dual entitlement. Nobody else gives you that. You don't get that anywhere else.
No. They make you buy it for each platform.
Yeah. Look, I think overall it was a good thing to do. I think it felt a little bit rushed. Sarah Bond seems super nervous to me. I just don't think she's used to doing that kind of stuff. Like Matt Booty and Phil been around for a long time doing that kind of thing. She just seemed out of place a little bit. She stumbled a lot over some of the things she was saying and some of the words that she, was saying. I just, there are some things about that. But I think that they did a good job of at least reassuring the people that have taking the time to put the money and effort into the ecosystem that like they're safe with that when a new generation comes, there'll be a new console for them to buy because it's going to still be the best place to get all that stuff, right? And that's like if you could go somewhere else, but you're gonna pay whatever the price is for it on that console to to do it outside of Game Pass. Mm-hmm. How would you grade it as a whole in terms of dealing with what the fallout had been prior to this?
I give it a B. Like I said, I thought it was a little bit too short. I think that was the only thing. Like it was shorter, and for some reason, like we're doing this on the Xbox podcast. It just sounded weird. I don't know. I think it was a little bit longer. But I know it's weird. Like I think I got what they have said
though in a longer span of time.
That's the thing. Like it just feels weird that it was as short as it was. But when I think about it, I got the answers I needed out of it. Like I didn't need any more of it. It just feels weird that it was just that short. I guess not what I'm used to as far as them doing this type of stuff. But
I mean, I feel like it was about the same length as when they did the here's the Xbox Bethesda sit down.
Mm-hmm.
It was like 30-ish minutes. I don't think that was weird. You know what I'm saying, so to speak. It look, I'll be honest, it was still shorter than I thought it was going to be, right? But I think because I was so unsure of exactly what it was they were going to say, because in my head, because they're saying, well, we were planning a business update anyway. This is sooner than I think they intended to talk to people. I think they were planning to probably like another month out or so make some sort of announcement that was probably going to also be tied to them announcing, they announced the showcase in June, but was kind of going to be a precursor to that.
Yeah.
And probably is going to be, we'll have more to say about what games and when, blah, blah, blah.
One of those, we're going to get the business stuff out of the way now in this conversation. And then in a month, when we come back, we're going to show you the games and all that type of stuff that are coming.
Or something along those lines, right? Like they haven't said they're doing anything in March, but like I feel like if they had done it in March, it'd have been like, we'll be back, we'll see you in June. You know what I mean? With more information or whatever. But I also feel like we might have gotten something a little bit longer that wouldn't have had to spend as much time kind of talking about the business and the state of gaming. And you know what I mean? Like people's concerns about, are they going to still make consoles and all that kind of stuff. I think they would have put something out that said, we know we have Activision Blizzard. Here's what we're doing with Activision. I feel like they would have put more on that, and there would have been a conversation, but I think they would have been talking more about games and like what games are coming in. So like with this, I almost feel like they maybe weren't ready to say it, but they felt like they couldn't do this without saying, if they had done this conversation and not address Activision Blizzard and like when we could start expecting to see those things come to Game Pass, that's all people would be talking about right now. They wouldn't even care anymore that they're like, yeah, there are going to be 4 games, but that whatever. It'd have been like, you have all these Activision Blizzard games. When are they coming? Why are we waiting on this? It just would have been more questions. And I think saying they're coming, starting with Diablo, is like, all right, cool. That tells us that's the start of it. We know it's not starting until March 28th, and then we're going to start seeing it,
the rollout,
hit or whatever, and they'll probably tell us what's coming when at that point, right? I feel like the initial discussion would have been very different. They may have even invited somebody from the Activision Blizzard side to come over and sit down and have that conversation with them in order to say, yep, like this is, so for me, I think in terms of handling all of the fallout that there was and kind of putting out fires that were burning while like laying a foundation that you can't really set on fire right now anyway, in front of them, I would say they did an A as far as that's concerned, because I think they answered all the things that people wanted to hear about. Maybe with the exception, like I think an A+ would have been like, here's the 4 games, here's what it is. But I think they answered there are going to be 4 games, and they told you why. They handled exclusivity, and they told you why that like kind of is in the air, and explain like what the state of the business means for that. And they told you, yeah, like the hardware is still coming. Like we're working on that hardware right now. You know what I mean? Like we're not abandoning the stuff that we've been spending millions of dollars doing R&D on and putting deals in place with AMD and whoever's doing our chips or whatever. Like we're not, that's not going away. So I think I'd give it an A, consider I feel like it kind of had to be rushed and was rushed, and that probably doing it in this format was the best way to do it under the circumstances. I think that's where I'm at.
Okay.
I also think, let me just make this very clear. I think I may have graded this closer to a C if like yesterday the president of Sony hadn't been like, yeah, we're looking at going more multi-platform with our games, with our more first-party games, because that's what the business needs. And now everybody, all right.
You got to look at one of the Microsoft Minecraft checks. It's like, you know what?
I'm just saying, like,
why aren't we doing this?
I mean, again, $40 game, but off the strength of having Helldivers 2 hit Steam and PC at the same time. Look, that doesn't mean that they're not necessarily saying they're going to be bringing games over to Xbox or be bringing games over to Nintendo, but there is a part of me that feels like, considering the struggles that they have had with live services and with getting live service games off the ground, the fact that they are already starting to cancel live service games and so forth, and that the one company they have that has successful live service games in Bungie that they bought releases on everything, says to me that if you're smart and you really want to do live services because there's money in it and it's necessary for your platform to continue to exist, they are going to have games that eventually will be coming to probably platforms like Xbox. And I think when they see those MLB checks from MLB the show,
the conversation is starting to be had around the Sony table. Like, all right, we really got to start looking at. We really got to take this seriously and start looking at it to bring in some more revenue.
When you've already shot yourself in the foot / put your foot in your mouth about we believe in generations, you can still believe in it. But that means you can say, but we believe in generations, but we don't believe that means we have to leave the last generation behind, right? Like you can finagle the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think if that hadn't happened, this is probably a C, because I think there'd be a lot more people who are still going, nah, dog, you don't know what you're talking about. Business in gaming is, you know what I mean? But like on the back of like every week, it's like, oh, all these people got laid off. Oh, all these people got laid off. Oh, all these people got laid off. And when you come out and you say, look, we're trying to make sure that the gaming industry is a sustainable business. And since we own most of the gaming industry, that's kind of important.
Yeah, it's up to us to lead that charge, pretty much. Like, so we don't have to do these layoffs. We're trying to not do these, so we're trying to find ways to bring in more income to get more, to pay these people. You know what I mean? So live service seems to be the way to go. Let's build something, put it multi-platform.
100%. And I'm going to tell you why I think the other reason why that also works, and having both of them say that kind of back to back, if you just look at the concern around Rocksteady, people are like, Rocksteady's such a great whatever. Suicide Squad, I don't know, man. People are concerned that so they're gonna have to start laying people off, and like what happens to Rocksteady, this incredible team of people who built these great games that we love, and we know that they can build great games, and their cutscenes are great, and the story is great, and there's all these great elements there, but they got seemingly forced into building a game that wasn't the kind of game that they do, that they make. And now we're probably looking at it cost us way too much money, and we're gonna have to let some people go. Right? And a great developer. You know what I'm saying?
Them up.
I mean, they might.
Put some up.
Right, but more than likely we see happen what has already happened from Rocksteady, which is people at the top of that studio left that studio and have already formed their own company. So that also is like, what is the success of this game under that team look like without those top people still being there to see that game through? Like, it just, that's the state that the industry is in. If Rocksteady goes under, to be like, y'all better let Microsoft put these games out wherever they want to.
Get some of that money back.
That's what it is. Listen, man, thanks for jumping in and having this conversation with us. Thanks to everybody who jumped in and made their points and listened. We got KatsuCon starting tomorrow.
Yep.
Panel at 5:00 on Saturday. Live 6 is the room. Come check us out if you're gonna be there. If you can't be at the panel, you see us, say what's up. We have movie club conversation about Scott Pilgrim versus the World on Monday, and then we're right back into Loading Snacks Weekly.
And everybody wants to join Thriller Park tonight at 9:30. Come in, join, watch some anime with us. Yeah, good times.
9:30, so late, man. Gotta be staying up late.
That's why we try to keep it to 3 episodes. But sometimes, you gotta do what you gotta do.
That's what we do for the love of this anime.
I'm about to say for the love.
For the love of the culture. All right, man. Listen, we're gonna get out of here. Again, we appreciate y'all tuning in. With that, we're out. Toodles and loose.
Loading Snacks.
Yeah.
All right, bro. I gotta talk to this Bram about coming on the show next week. So I'm getting ready to do that.
do some packing shit and watch Scott Pilgrim while I do it. Because
Yeah, I gotta figure out when I'm doing that.
yeah, I gotta get that knocked out. I won't have time this weekend, so let me do it now while I'm packing up shit.
I'm getting ready to get my hair done, so maybe I'll do it while that's happening.
Sounds like a plan.
We'll see. All right, bro. Deuces.
All right, fam. Oh, well, mouse, that's why. Change this shit. Design.